Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, was supposed to be the good guy of crypto. He wore hoodies, talked about ethics, and promised to give away his billions to charity. He built FTX into one of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world and became a media darling almost overnight. But beneath the image was a massive lie. In late 2022, it came out that billions of dollars of customer funds were quietly moved from FTX to another company Sam controlled. FTX users thought their money was sitting safely on the platform, but it wasn't. When that truth came to light, the entire thing unraveled. Bankruptcy, investigations, arrests, and in 2023, SBF was convicted of fraud. Over $8 billion in customer funds were gone, and the so-called ethical billionaire was headed to prison. But what if we didn't have to wait for it all to fall apart? What if someone had asked him the right question and used, potentially, I can know, to test the truth in real time? Today in Truth Quest, we're revisiting key moment where deception shaped FTX's disaster and asking how mobile lie detection might have changed everything. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Mary Claire. This is going to be exciting. Yeah, we should just tell our listeners really quickly that we thought about what if we went back in time and looked at things people had done, and if we could tell whether they were telling the truth at that moment, what would be different? How would it turn out? Now, we can all say, oh, it would have been better for sure. But if we look back and say, had they told the truth, had we known when they were lying or when they were telling the truth, what outcomes would have been different and how might things have changed? So we're gonna start off doing this with Sam Bankman-Fried, which I think should be interesting. So do you want to set the scene a little, Mary Claire? You want to tell us kind of a little more detail what happened here, and we can kind of think through this together.
Pause. Brian, I think I already did that. So, I have nothing else to say about it. So I don't feel very prepared.
Okay, no. Here, I can pick up right on that, and let's just keep going with it. Okay, so let me just pick up with that. So if we think back to this, the state of the crypto industry, back when Sam Bankman-Fried was creating FTX. I don't know if you remember this, Mary Claire, but he was the company name was appearing everywhere. I mean, It was like they were sponsoring arenas. They were growing very quickly. He was also presenting himself as like this ethical billionaire, which you mentioned in your intro, that he was going to impact politics, and he was in social issues and the climate and all of these things. He kept talking about ways that, he would use his money for good and that he would be doing the right things, while underneath, we had all of these other things that were going on that nobody knew about at all. And it would have been, you think about how interesting it would have been to, at the moment when he's saying, my intention is to change, climate change and society and politics, if there could have been an opportunity to ask him some of these questions about, is that true? Is that accurate? Is that really what you're trying to accomplish?
What's funny is at the same time, we're talking about Sam, the people around him too, because I'm sure questions were asked, but were they asked deeply enough? Like, could somebody, and maybe it was, and maybe it was covered up, and I feel like I'm still learning what's gone on, what's been uncovered. But similarly, in fact, I was just working with PIs and them using this with key witnesses. So those individuals are like key witnesses. So also, one, were they equipped to ask the right questions? But what if they were required to tell the truth to their leader too, or force their leader, which I hadn't thought about until right now.
No, that's a very interesting point. You think about the strategies of lying as well. One of the things that Sam Bankman-Fried did really well is he would speak with very high levels of complexity and a lot of jargon. And what that does is puts people on the defensive, right? Where they feel like, ooh, if I question this in any way, I'm going to be seen as stupid because I don't understand what that person is saying, but I don't really want to call them out because I'm afraid that that I might be exposed, right, as not really understanding what's going on. When in fact, that's a strategy of the liar, is to speak in those kinds of ways in order to get people to be on their back heels a little bit and to not be willing to question. It's like, oh, Sam Bankman-Fried, he's the whiz kid. He's the MIT math genius. And when he speaks in these complex and jargony ways, that's not him speaking in complex and jargony ways. That's him speaking in brilliant and genius ways. And I'm not a brilliant genius. And so I can't really ask, or I can't really probe.
I think I may take us down a little track here, but him being in college and the math genius made me think we don't become quote unquote bad people overnight. It's a lot of little decisions over time, or a lot of little lies that move us in a direction. So at one point, when we talk about what if the little decisions he started to make, or any one of us can make, but in this case, he started to make at a certain point in time that started to lead in this direction. What if? What if there was
that's
accountability?
A fascinating
then?
question. And think about this from a standard operating procedure within a company. What if a company had the means to implement at any given time a test to just see if what someone was saying was actually true? It was something that we did automatically, right? Like someone makes a claim and you say, okay, you know what? Now we need to take the test. Let's find out whether or not that's true. So let's say that Sam Bankman-Fried comes in and says, hey, we're going to move funds to the Bahamas and we're going to buy this property. Remember when he was buying all these properties in the Bahamas and using all this money? So he transferred money to Alameda Research, and then they used those funds, which were customer funds, to do all kinds of things, right? What if at that point in time, his explanation, whatever it was tested? And you found out, oh, you know what? That's not really accurate. That's not really true. Then to your point, that small decision, now that actually was probably a bigger decision, but earlier decisions could be actually tested and looked at.
Well, on that line of thought, Brian, we think about like what are feasible use cases, and these what ifs aren't always going to be feasible use cases. It's a general like what if in the value, and the what if of with now more accessible lie detection technology, what is possible. But what I hadn't thought about, and which is actually a very real use case, is, and already done in some countries with people handling money, they do have to take lie detection tests.
Yeah.
And this would have been a very credible use, and credible in terms of the test would have worked, but a use case that makes sense and is real. There's potential there that I guess I hadn't thought of. If you're handling other people's money, why shouldn't lie detection be a part of that?
Why shouldn't it? Exactly. And you think about these other people involved in this scandal. I mean, what if Carolyn Ellison, right, SBF's girlfriend, what if she had stepped forward and said, you know what, I don't necessarily understand everything you're saying right now, but I just want a quick test to find out whether or not what you're saying is true. I mean, even simple things when Sam Bankman-Fried says things like, hey, assets are fine, company's fine, FTX is fine, everything's good. In some ways, you wonder if he even believes that, because you get to a point where he's like, I'm the smart guy, I'll figure this out. When in fact, he knows that he's made decisions that aren't ethical. And if you ask those questions, you would have found out early on in the process.
Yeah, that's a good point. I totally lost my train of thought, Brian.
That's okay. The other thing that strikes me as interesting is even in his post, collapse, his infamous quote, like, I effed up, right?
Yeah.
And he clearly knew that he had, and I think he knew along the way that he was walking a slippery slope. So if you get into this situation where you're like, all right, I know that I'm not doing the right things, but I'm hiding it from everybody else. And, you're giving interviews, you're sending out tweets, you're denying your wrongdoing. All of these at any little point might have changed the game.
Well, and that natural tendency of, in some ways, like, is this person a bad person or not? I don't, however you want to define that. But what's interesting is that one little, we talked about this, one little decision leads to a little, that then you have this ball of spaghetti that's just a disaster. And
Right.
Curious if I'd be curious if he actually intended to deceive people initially. Maybe he was in little ways for, in his mind, a greater good, but then that deception turned into bigger deception. There's also this idea of when you're in that level of power, we're seeing this in media right now with unfortunate things going on with sex trafficking, but when power goes to your head, do you believing you're better than, or you're above above the law, above telling the truth, above. I'd be curious with Sam, was it one little decision led to another when I felt like I had to cover it up, so it was a ball of spaghetti, or was it more power driven where?
That's fascinating. You think about, in fact, maybe we'll do an episode on Sean Diddy Combs in the future just to see kind of what that looked like. But think about what happens to most of us when we kind of start going down this path. I think we know that what we're doing is not the complete right thing, but we rationalize to ourselves in ways that we say, I'll fix this. I can overcome this. Like, I'll move money from this account to this account and I'll pay it back in the future. Or we'll cover this quickly from this set of funds, and then we'll move things around, or this deal will come in and I'll be able to put the money back in and no one will really know. Right.
Yeah.
And you start to even believe that when people start questioning you about it. It's like, hey, I noticed that these funds aren't here. And you're like, I'm always intending to pay it back. I'm always intending to do the right thing. So I say something like, it's okay. Nothing wrong has gone on here. When in fact we know it has, but we think we can make it right as we go forward. And then when that whole thing unravels or implodes is when we can't make it right. And we extended ourselves a little bit too far, right?
Well, trying to catch it before we catch ourselves, or caught not in a gotcha sort of way, but let's get it right back on the right path. What signs would we looking, hindsight's 2020. So looking back, maybe likely whether it was regulators or internal staff question him sooner, what signs of deception would you expect to see versus what we actually saw, or what people actually saw? And it may get back to the fact, Brian, what you said earlier, how he spoke was always using complex language and jargon. You don't want to see deception, or you don't think you put so much faith and trust in somebody, you're blinded to see deception potentially.
Yeah. And, it was clear that there were a number of times when Carolyn and others questioned him on what was going on. That was their testimony, that they had these conversations and that he would say things like, hey, everything is fine. This is going to be okay. This is why it works. And again, using that complexity and that jargon and that math brilliance, I think made people feel like, well, he must know what's going on. And maybe he thought he knew what was going on to some degree as well. But still, I think even his admission later revealed the fact that he knew that he was walking a line that he probably shouldn't have been walking. And it's interesting because there were probably moments where a very well-timed lie detection would have changed the outcomes in pretty dramatic ways. So, I mean, for example, in fact, I think there were 2 to 3 key moments. I don't know. Do you want to touch on some of those, Mary Claire, that we can talk about?
Well, one of them was this interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin at a summit, which I don't know the interview, but what I'm presuming whatever he said in that interview could have changed some outcomes. Do you know what that interview was, Brian?
No, I don't. We should maybe let's do a quick here. I'll tell you what. I'm going to pause this really fast. So, Mary Claire, what if Ike and Noe had been there to test him at key moments? It seems like there's 3 really big key moments that had we had a lie detector test right there, would have been really interesting, right? One of those was his interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin in the New York Times. Another one is his internal staff call where he denied to his staff doing anything wrong. And the third one was a very public tweet thread that came out, right? Yeah. I remember those as well. So why don't you take us through the interview first?
Okay, so this interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin, it was weeks after the collapse, and he appeared. It was virtually at a summit, New York Times Deal Book Summit, and I think at this time he was in the Bahamas, and he told the journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin that he didn't quote unquote didn't knowingly commingle funds. That he was just confused.
That would have been a good first question, right? Yeah. Did you knowingly commingle funds?
Yep. Because it's an action. It's a decision.
Right.
So presuming commingling funds was effectively defined. But he said he was confused about the billions of missing of dollars. I don't know how you get confused about billions of missing of dollars. I remember this thinking like, this is bull.
Right.
Anyway. So anyway, he seemed like this aloof, kind of overwhelmed, careless individual, but not corrupt.
Hmm.
And that was kind of the beginning of him saying, "Hey, I just messed up," or "I just, effed up." But and like me, many felt like there's something off here. This seems like an excuse. He's not owning up to anything. So in that moment, to your point, like what would it have been like if we were able to use lie detection in that moment to distinguish between his incompetence versus active decisions he made to deceive? Um,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have changed. I don't, what had happened, it had happened, but it would have sped up the process a little bit in terms of getting to the truth.
Right. Right. This second one, this internal staff call, was really interesting. We don't have all of the of the information about this, the specific details about this, but some of this came out in the legal proceedings afterwards. And so he shared a letter with FTX employees via the company's Slack channel where he expressed deep regret over the situation. And he stated he felt deeply sorry about what happened. And he acknowledged that he froze up in the face of pressure as the company collapsed, which is interesting because that's actually a response after the fact, right?
Yeah.
I mean, had we known leading up to it, would have been really interesting because he didn't address any of the allegations concerning the misappropriation of the customer funds or the financial relationship between FTX and its sister company, Alameda Research. So he admitted to significant he admitted to significant mistakes and a lack of risk management, but he denied any intent to defraud. So he said, I wasn't involved in Alameda's trading decisions, and I was unaware of the misuse of customer funds until after the collapse. So you can think about where, again, internally or even from a regulatory standpoint, you could have asked both of those questions.
Yeah.
Number one, did you know about Alameda's trading decisions? Were you involved in that? Because that's a very important first step in the defrauding part of this. And the second part of this is, were you unaware of the misuse of the customer funds? Well, those are two quick and easy questions you could have asked.
The third is interesting. Again, these are all a little bit after the fact, but this Twitter, and again, you and I remember this as well. The Twitter kind of quote unquote FTX is fine, assets are fine, and then telling his staff, "I love you all." And then two days later, they file for bankruptcy. Like, are you insane? I mean, that's at what point I'm like, are you mentally ill? Like, is there how does that happen? Or you
Right.
still believe that you can save this? So, and the other unfortunate, we talk about the what ifs of this. Like, if I am an employee of this company, or if that's my money, we already have an issue, at least in this country, on a total lack of trust from institutions. And this was a major, so to speak, institution within the crypto world. I feel like I understood crypto better, or it was becoming more real, maybe not the term, but legitimate in terms of the everyday person, so to speak, with FTX. It's something about it made it feel more legitimate, their rise. And then this happens. And so there's a broader issue of just distrust with institutions, which I feel like is a challenge for our country. But then being an employer, this is your money, and somebody just blatantly lying. So again, what if we would have been able to use lie detection ideally earlier on? But is FTX fine? Is FTX specific questions about the financials, specific questions as related to the health of the assets? You can't test on love, but we could test on the actions, behaviors as it relates to the financials and specifically the assets of FTX.
Right. It's really interesting. You've said a couple of times when you were listening to him speak, you're like, that's bull.
Yeah.
And, it's so interesting because, whether you're listening to politicians and we all know that our current slate of politicians, wow. I mean, the number of lies that seem to be coming there. And so many times you hear them talk and you say to yourself, I know that's not true.
Yeah.
Right. I know that's not accurate. I mean, I think there's been a bank of lie tracking or truth tracking that is showing that Trump has lied like 30,000 times in the last year or something. I mean, it's just crazy numbers, right? But there's a lot of times we listen to our politicians and we're like, that's just not true. That's not accurate. That's not right.
We're completely evading the question.
Yeah, but we have no mechanism to call it out. We have no way to say, well, the emperor has no clothes. And whether the strategy like Sam Bankman-Fried is to use jargon and talk at a really high level, or whether it's like a lot of our politicians, which is to just say it over and over and over again definitively as if it's true, then we start to believe it, or something happens over time. Or we do backroom deals and never let them see the light of day. There's lots of strategies, right, for lies. But what we don't seem to have is a great mechanism to bring it to light, to call it out, to say, is that really what's going on? And technology can certainly do some of that. I think it's going to continue to get better and better. But the interesting part is, like, what would that have looked like had we all known the truth up front and could have made decisions based on truth? I think we all know the world would be better. But how? Well, in each of these areas, I think that there are key things that could have changed that would make the world a better place.
Well, and again, part of our core in terms of what we're trying to do is create access to truth verification to be used in appropriate ways. And when all these things were going on, that accessibility wasn't there. So now that it is there, what opportunities are there, specifically in the financial world, financial advisors or executives, people dealing with others' money? Is there opportunity there? Is there a level of accountability that we, as the people trusting our advisors or our whoever, that we could, is there opportunity there?
You think about this, it's fascinating is really we have the technology now available where Caroline could have said, I'm going to go build a test.
Yeah.
She could have come out to our site. She could have built a test that said, are you lying about X? Fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And she could have administered that test to SBF at any point in time and found out whether or not what he was saying was actually true from his perspective. And that, I think, would have been fascinating.
Well, what if, right?
Yeah.
What if? Okay,
well, we're going to do more of these, right? We've got a whole lineup of some interesting things that we think might be worth our thought in terms of what would this look like had we known the truth earlier. You can think about diving into things like President Nixon's Watergate, or
Michigan sign stealing,
or a big one is what happened at Michigan State with the sex scandal, right? I mean, so many people saw the evidence and listened to him say what he was saying and turned their head the other direction. At what points could have we known and really, changed the trajectory for so many victims that might have happened there? That's a big one. So we're excited about this. I think it'll be fun to go through and just do a little bit of what ifing and see where some of this technology might have really helped or changed things.
That'll be fun. And if you guys have any ideas, please feel free to share them. We'd love to tackle it.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. All right, Mary Claire, thanks so much for being on today. Very fun, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Sounds good.
All right. Till next time, we hope your quest for truth is successful.